He thought she was just a black waitress, until she helped his disabled son take the lead. Comment below your city and hit the subscribe button if you liked the video. The restaurant was silent. Every fork froze midair, every conversation cut short. At the center of it all was a boy, trembling, his legs bound in braces, taking a step no one believed he could. And beside him stood a waitress the world barely noticed, her hand steady, her smile encouraging. She gave him courage when no one else dared. What happened next would not only shatter the silence of that room, but change the life of a billionaire forever. The restaurant was the kind of place that seemed untouchable. Polished floors gleamed under warm chandeliers, fine china sparkled on tables, and waiters moved with precise, practiced grace. It was here that Manhattan's elite came to dine, to see and be seen, to mark their status with every sip of wine and every clink of cutlery. And yet, despite all the wealth, the real stories of courage often hid in the corners, unnoticed by everyone but those paying attention. At a small table near the center, a young boy sat, his legs encased in metal braces. Lucas had always loved movement, the way music could lift his spirits even if his body resisted. But every day he faced the frustration of limitation, steps that others took for granted, movements he had to work for with painstaking effort. Today was supposed to be no different, another formal dinner where his presence was politely admired but largely ignored. Beside him stood his father, a man whose life was defined by precision, wealth, and control. The billionaire patriarch, Richard Montgomery, had built his empire from nothing, commanding rooms with charisma and confidence, accustomed to having everything go exactly according to plan. Yet even he had learned that not everything could be controlled, especially the moments that defy expectation. The staff moved with quiet efficiency. Among them was a young black waitress named Maya. She was no stranger to the high-powered clientele of the restaurant. Yet she moved with a humility that set her apart. For her, work was not just a job. It was a chance to see people, to notice the small, meaningful moments that others overlooked. She had learned to watch carefully, to listen quietly, and to act when someone needed encouragement. Lucas's eyes flicked nervously toward the polished dance floor. Music had begun to play softly, a waltz that seemed too grand for his tiny, braces-bound legs. The other children in the restaurant stayed seated, watched over by attentive nannies. But Lucas felt a pull toward movement, a desire that refused to be stifled by the limitations imposed by his body. He wanted to dance. Maya noticed immediately. She saw the hesitation, the tension in his shoulders, the almost imperceptible longing in his eyes. Without a word, she stepped closer, lowering herself to his level, her hand offering gentle encouragement. It was a simple gesture, but to Lucas it felt like the entire world opening up. The other diners barely noticed. Their attention was fixed on their conversations, their screens, their social rituals. A world defined by wealth often moves at a pace that leaves small moments invisible, but in the middle of this polished environment, something extraordinary was about to unfold, a moment that would shatter the routine, the hierarchy, and the expectations of everyone in the room. Maya's quiet confidence was contagious. Lucas tentatively lifted one foot, then another, the braces clicking against the polished floor. The sound was subtle, almost lost in the ambient noise, but it carried with it a promise that courage can emerge when support arrives from the right person, at the right moment. Richard, his father, watched from across the table. He saw the movement but could not yet understand its significance. To him, it was merely a small gesture, a boy trying, a waitress helping. Yet even as he observed, something began to shift. In that instant, he glimpsed the power of attention, empathy, and action, and he would not forget it. Little did anyone know that this fleeting moment, invisible to many, would grow into a turning point. A simple act of encouragement, a hand extended at just the right time, would set off a chain of events that transformed not only Lucas's confidence, but also the father's perspective on life, wealth, and what truly matters. It was the beginning of a story that no amount of money could have bought, a story written in courage, kindness, and the small, unnoticed moments that reveal the extraordinary within the ordinary. The music swelled, filling the restaurant with a gentle, lilting rhythm, Every note seemed to hang in the air, heavy with expectation, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Lucas's trembling hands gripped Maya's, his small frame straining against the limitations of his braces. He had come this far, but the next step, the one that mattered most, loomed before him. The other diners watched quietly, curiosity and surprise etched into their faces. The parents of other children whispered under their breath, some glancing nervously at the boy, unsure if they should applaud or look away. The restaurant's usual elegance felt fragile, suspended in the tension of what might happen next. And at a corner table, the father, a billionaire whose life had been defined by certainty and control, leaned forward in disbelief, his eyes never leaving the scene. Richard Montgomery had seen countless performances, countless displays of skill, but nothing like this. His son, who had struggled with movement all his life, was attempting something no one had thought possible. And yet, it wasn't just the boy's effort that captured him. It was the quiet power of the woman beside him, steadying him, guiding him, believing in him when the world had not. Lucas lifted his foot once, then again, following the rhythm, with tentative precision. The braces clinked softly against the polished floor. The diners shifted, some rising slightly from their chairs, captivated by the courage in front of them. The boy's initial fear gave way to concentration, then to a subtle, growing confidence. Every step he took was a small triumph, a challenge, to the assumptions of weakness that the world had long placed upon him. Maya's voice, low and encouraging, was a lifeline. "You've got this," she whispered. "One step at a time. I'm right here." Her hand never wavered, her gaze never faltered. To Lucas, it was more than guidance. It was belief made tangible, a force strong enough to lift him beyond fear. And then, the moment that would define the night arrived. Lucas extended his arms, tentatively leading the next movement. For the first time, he wasn't just following, he was guiding. The room, which had been holding its collective breath, exhaled softly, in awe. Some diners whispered with astonishment. Some held their hands to their mouths, unable to speak. And the father, seated at his table, felt a rush of emotions he had never experienced before. Pride, disbelief, and a strange, profound humility. Richard watched as the boy's confidence grew with each step. This was no longer about a dance. It was a revelation. His son, limited, constrained, often doubted, was leading with courage. And beside him, Maya's steady presence made the impossible seem attainable. Every eye in the room was drawn. To them, every conversation paused, every attention focused on a moment of triumph that transcended wealth, status, or expectation. The turning point was sudden and electric. Lucas spun slightly, his movement awkward yet beautiful in its determination. He smiled, a wide, radiant smile that lit his face in a way that no polished chandelier could. The sound of applause erupted, hesitant at first, then louder, filling the restaurant with energy. The parents of other children clapped, some standing in admiration. Waiters paused mid-step, diners rose from their chairs, and even the somber staff could not help but smile at the sheer audacity of what had occurred. The father could not contain himself. He rose from his chair, suit jacket falling open, eyes shining with emotion. He moved toward the boy and the woman who had made this moment possible, his steps quick, uncalculated, driven by a force stronger than wealth or propriety. Gratitude. When he reached them, he knelt to Lucas's level. "You did it, son," he said, his voice shaking slightly, thick with emotion. I can't believe you did it." He turned toward Maya. "And you? You saw him when no one else did. You gave him the courage we all lacked." His words carried weight not just for the two of them, but for everyone present. For the first time, the billionaire father understood something fundamental. Power, money, and status could command respect, but they could not inspire courage. They could not instill belief. Only connection, empathy, and the willingness to see beyond appearances could create a moment like this. Maya's hands remained steady on Lucas, but her eyes glistened with emotion. "He always had it in him," she said softly. "He just needed someone to trust him." The father smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the hardened edges of years spent in boardrooms and deals. He reached down, taking his son's hand in his, feeling the strength and determination within that small grasp. And in that instant, he realized something that would alter not just his relationship with his son, but his entire perspective on life. True greatness is measured not in wealth, but in courage, empathy, and the ability to see what others do not. The dining room had erupted into applause, yet in that chaos, a quiet reverence persisted. No one moved too quickly, no one spoke too loudly. Everyone understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a lesson in humanity, resilience, and the power of belief. But the climax did not end there. Richard's voice carried over the din. "This changes everything," he said, not just to his son or the waitress, but to everyone present. "I've spent my life measuring success by numbers, by deals, by acquisitions. But none of that matters without courage, without seeing, without believing in someone when no one else does." A hush fell again, heavier than before. The father looked at Maya, then back at his son. "You've taught me more tonight than I've ever learned in my office." His words, raw and heartfelt, left everyone in the restaurant. The elite, the staff, the families, stunned. And as the applause faded, the father leaned closer to Lucas and whispered, "Tonight, you led, and I followed." The power of the moment lingered in the air, a tangible force that had shifted expectations, perceptions, and priorities. In the quiet aftermath, the father realized that life had given him a rare gift, a chance to witness courage in its purest form, and to recognize that true leadership sometimes comes from those we least expect. Cliffhanger. The world outside the restaurant might never fully understand the magnitude of this evening. But for the father, the son, and the waitress who dared to believe, nothing would ever be the same, and the lessons of this night would ripple far beyond the walls of the restaurant. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. The soft hum of conversation and clinking cutlery no longer carried the same detachment. The night's extraordinary moment lingered like a quiet echo, reminding everyone present that life could surprise even in the most controlled environments. Lucas had returned to his seat, his small chest still rising and falling with the adrenaline of triumph. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar: confidence. A spark of self-belief had been ignited, one that would not fade with time. His legs, encased in braces, no longer felt like obstacles but like instruments of achievement. Every small movement became a reminder that courage could overcome limitation. Maya, the waitress, continued her work with quiet grace. Yet now there was a subtle shift in how she was seen. No longer just another face in the background, she had become the person who had changed the course of a life, and in doing so, had changed the man who held the world in his hands. She moved among the tables, polite and humble, but there was a newfound respect in every glance she received. Patrons whispered, colleagues nodded, and even the restaurant manager offered a smile that carried the weight of acknowledgement. Richard Montgomery, the billionaire father, sat back at his table, processing what had just occurred. He had always believed he understood the world, that wealth and influence were the ultimate measures of control and success. But tonight had shown him a profound truth. True greatness was not about power, prestige, or fortune. It was about presence, empathy, and the willingness to see beyond appearances. His son had led the dance, a waitress had guided him, and both had taught him lessons that no number, contract, or deal ever could. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect of that evening became clear. Lucas's confidence grew in ways his parents had only dreamed of. He began taking small steps on his own, practicing at home and at therapy sessions with a newfound sense of determination. His laughter, once hesitant, became full-bodied and infectious, echoing through the halls of his home. And for Richard, the transformation was even more profound. He started spending time with Lucas in ways he never had before, attending therapy sessions, practicing dances, and most importantly, learning to listen and observe. Maya's life changed too. She was offered recognition, promotions, and even opportunities outside the restaurant that she had never imagined. But she remained grounded, focused not on fame or fortune, but on the moments that mattered most, the courage she had witnessed and nurtured. Her impact was quiet but enduring, rippling through the lives of those she touched with her patience, empathy, and belief in human potential. The story, naturally, spread far beyond the restaurant's walls. Social media picked it up. Local news outlets ran features, and soon, national publications were sharing the tale of a young boy, his devoted father, and the waitress whose encouragement had made a life-changing difference. The story resonated deeply because it was simple yet profound, a testament to the extraordinary power of small, selfless acts. Richard, inspired by the moment, began to rethink his priorities in both business and life. He instituted programs at his company focused on mentorship, empathy, and awareness. Leaders were trained to observe not just the numbers, but the people behind them. Wellness programs expanded, and employee recognition shifted to highlight courage, creativity, and initiative rather than just financial results. In private, Richard often reflected on what had truly mattered that night. It was not the applause, not the social media attention, not even the immediate gratitude. It was the realization that life's most profound lessons often come from the least expected sources. A young boy and a humble waitress had reminded him that human connection, attention, and encouragement were far more valuable than any amount of wealth. For Lucas, the lesson was equally profound. He learned that limitations do not define a person. Belief and persistence do. That evening became a cornerstone in his personal development, a reference point for courage in moments of doubt. He carried the memory with him into school, social activities, and therapy, becoming a beacon of determination for others facing similar challenges. The restaurant itself became symbolic, a place where extraordinary moments could unfold in the midst of routine. Patrons and staff alike carried the story forward, reminding one another that life's quiet heroes often operate in the background, unseen but indispensable. Maya continued her work there, and every time Lucas returned, the memory of that first lead dance step echoed in the polished floors and soft lighting, a living reminder of what belief and encouragement could accomplish. The impact extended beyond the immediate circle. Families shared the story with children, teachers spoke of it in classrooms, and social groups discussed it as an example of empathy, courage, and the transformative power of human attention. Lucas's story became a teaching tool, a reminder that greatness often hides in humility and that life's most meaningful moments are forged in connection rather than competition. Years later, the memory of that evening remained vivid. Richard had become a different man, more patient, more observant, more deeply aware of the importance of encouraging others, regardless of status. Maya's influence rippled quietly through her community, inspiring those around her to notice the small acts of bravery in their daily lives. And Lucas, who had once trembled at the thought of a single dance step, continued to face challenges with courage, always remembering the hand that guided him and the father who learned to see him anew. Ultimately, the story carried a universal truth. True change does not always arrive through grand gestures or wealth. It comes in moments of quiet courage, in the willingness to see what others ignore, and in the acts of kindness that allow someone else to shine. For the father, the son, and the waitress, that night was more than a memory. It was a turning point, a shared experience that redefined their lives forever. And the question that lingers, long after the applause has faded, is one that resonates beyond any restaurant, any billionaire's fortune, any single act. Who are we noticing today? Who is waiting for our encouragement, and how might a single gesture change a life, or even ours?